Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to News Dose, and it's been a fairly chaotic day in the gaming space. I'd say really for all of the wrong reasons. We have a major Xbox delay to talk about as their biggest 2025 game has now been pushed back. We'll talk about all of the reasons as to why that's going on and what's happening over there. And then we also have a studio closure to talk about as well. And this is a pretty high-profile AAA studio. Now, fret not, we do have some good news to talk about as well. Make sure to stay tuned. But first, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for what you do, and you will receive this video through early access. Let's just go and get right into things, though. And like I said, we do have some good news as well, because if you need any more evidence that a Tony Hawk 3+4 remake is on the way, well, a Singapore rating just popped up online. I mean, these ratings more often than not seems to tell the future, and in this case, there is one interesting aspect that we didn't already know about. If you look at the platforms listed, you'll notice all the expected suspects are there: Xbox, PlayStation, and PC, but you'll also notice the Nintendo Switch. Now, to be fair, Tony Hawk 1+2 did release on the Switch 3 months after other platforms, so it's 100% possible that 3+4 could also be achieved on the Switch. I mean, they've managed it before, so why couldn't they do that once again? However, just kind of considering the Switch 2 is right around the corner, I figured they would just kind of wait for its launch instead. That way it could look even better, and I'm still not going to necessarily rule that out. But either which way, a Nintendo release seems very plausible by this point. Now we're just kind of waiting for an official announcement, which is expected to be next week on March 4th. Now, one of my favorite games from last year was Silent Hill 2. The thing about the remake, though, is that there was a lot of skepticism leading up to its release because it was handled by Bloober team, which previously was kind of the definition of mediocrity. I mean, they have some okay games. I enjoyed Medium as one such example, but nothing that's really viewed as truly great. So there was some concern about them handling one of the all-time great horror games ever made, and they did make some character changes that fans didn't necessarily agree with, but for the most part, they not only proved that they can make a great Silent Hill 2 remake, but so much so that Konami has now confirmed that they're working with them once again on yet another collaboration. You can see their statement here, which reads, "The trust built upon the success of Silent Hill 2 laid the foundation for signing another agreement for a new project. The deal aligns with Bloober Team's strategic plan to expand its internal development division within a first-party framework." Now, they're currently not giving any type of information about what they might be working on together. This is still years out from any kind of reveal. But just kind of considering this deal was a result of Silent Hill 2's success, I mean, it seems likely that it could deal with the Silent Hill franchise once again. Maybe a remake of the first game. That would make a lot of sense. But either which way, now that Bloober Team has truly put themselves on the map, hopefully they'll learn from not only what they did good in Silent Hill 2, but also from some of their mistakes, and maybe they can make the next one even better. Now, here's an interesting story that puts some perspective on the PC gaming handheld market. This is very much a market that's still in its infancy stage, and you might wonder how these devices are currently doing. Well, according to The Verge, they asked a market research firm that tracks supply chain shipments, IDC, to give them an estimation on these devices. And they tracked PC gaming handhelds at around 6 million units shipped for its first 3 years, with the Steam Deck being the vast majority. They estimated the Steam Deck at 3.7 million units. Now, at first, that might not necessarily sound like a lot compared to mainstream consoles, but the AMD game marketing boss believes otherwise. He said, "I think it's amazing. This didn't exist 3 years ago. We went from nothing, zero, to incremental category creation in the millions of units." And that's something that I do ultimately agree with. These devices haven't necessarily broken into the mainstream just yet, but it is a growing and exciting part of the market that's only going to get better as time goes on. Technology will improve, and as other key players joins the fray, these devices are going to get even more attention. Xbox and PlayStation, as example, are both reportedly working on their own handhelds. And that'll likely be another boost once they put their own version out in the coming years. I mean, you look at something like the PlayStation Portal, which a lot of people scoffed at. This is a remote playing device, but that thing has already sold nearly 2 million units, which if we compare that to these PC gaming handhelds and what they've been estimated to have sold, $2 million seems very impressive. So a truly legitimate PlayStation handheld, I think would put up some pretty impressive numbers. For the time being, though, what I'd like to see from Valve, kind of being the pioneer for this market, is to really put the Steam Deck in the public's eyes. Valve is an amazing company with a great storefront. I think the Steam Deck is absolutely awesome, but to get it in front of that more casual audience, I'd like to see them put their hardware in retail stores. Okay, so let's go talk about this Xbox delay. Truthfully, I wouldn't be all that surprised if we have these topics a little bit more frequently this year. I'll come back to that here in just a moment, but unfortunately, Xbox's most anticipated 2025 game has now been pushed into 2026, being none other than Fable. Xbox dropped a 19-minute podcast just to announce this. I mean, they talked about some other games as well, but this obviously was their big news, and I think the reason that they did it this way is because they wanted to lessen the blow by explaining the situation and by showing some new gameplay footage to, kind of ease fans and the tension that this announcement might cause. And in fact, let's just kind of listen to what Craig Duncan had to say.
Well, there's one other highly anticipated game that people would be very excited about that we haven't talked about yet, and that's Fable.
Yes.
So where are we at with Fable?
So I just want to start with really excited about progress, really excited where Playground are. We previously announced the date for Fable as 2025. We are actually going to give Fable more time, and it's going to ship in 2026 now. And while I know that's not maybe the news people want to hear, what I want to assure people of is that it's definitely worth the wait. I have unequivocal confidence in the Playground team. If you think about their history and legacy for Forza Horizon, last two games critically acclaimed, 92 Metacritic. Award-winning, beautiful, played great, and just what they're bringing to Fable as a franchise. Just think of the visuals of what you expect of Playground games, plus, amazing gameplay, British humor, Playground's version of Albion, so inspired by what's gone before with the franchise, but their take in quite frankly the most beautifully realized version of Albion you've ever seen. So really excited about the plans and really excited about the future, and I want the community to understand that we do these things for the best of the games and the teams, and ultimately that results in the best games or the best game for the community.
And there it is. What he said there at the end, I think is the reality of the situation. While yes, he seems to think that it's shaping up incredibly well, I mean, the new gameplay does look very good based on what they showed, but he also wants to do what's best for the game, and that's to give it more time. Now, there's also been some theories that it's because they want a PS5 day one release. I mean, we'll kind of see what happens with all that, but my only thing about this delay is that while I don't necessarily view it as a bad thing, I mean, you all know me, I don't really mind being a little bit patient if it means a better end result, but I do think that it's somewhat ridiculous just how long some of these AAA games takes to make, and Fable is kind of a victim of that. I mean, this is a game that started development back in 2018. So we're now talking about an 8-year development cycle. And hopefully, the wait will be worth it. Again, it looks good so far. But this is kind of important, not only for this topic, but for our next topic as well. The management for these modern AAA games and their budgets are just so out of control. And a large part of that comes back to how long these games are in development. I mean, if you go back to the PS3 and the Xbox 360 as an example, you'll notice that franchises used to get multiple releases in a generation. Look at something like Uncharted 1 through 3, Gears of War 1 through 3, and Judgment. But that's not what we really see anymore. We're now lucky to get a single entry from a franchise in a decade. And because the budgets are just so bloated and just so out of control by this point, companies have to sell like 6, 7, 8 million copies for razor-thin profits. And if they don't, then they're at risk of closure. Now, I'm not saying that Playground is in that situation, but I do kind of wonder about Fable's budget and just how much this game has cost them. I mean, the caveat here is that this is from Playground Games, which has been an incredibly successful Xbox studio with multiple Forza Horizon releases within that same time frame. But still, 8 years from their newly established studio within Playground Games, that is pretty crazy. Now, I will say this much, though. I am expecting a lot of delays in 2025. If you haven't already noticed, there's not really a lot of definitive releases for the second half of the year, and that's simply because of a little game that goes by the name of Grand Theft Auto 6. I think a lot of companies are trying to steer clear of whenever that game decides to release, which means early 2026 could likely be fairly busy. Now, will Fable release in early 2026? We don't currently have that information, but as soon as we do, of course, I'll let you know. Let me know what you all think about this delay, though, in the comments below. Now, the other big announcement of the day comes from a studio closure. Yeah, these are never fun topics to talk about, and especially this time because it comes from a pretty well-known storied studio. This is for Monolith Productions, which, if you're unaware of who they are, you might be aware of some of their work, which includes Fear 1 and Fear 2, and also the Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor series. A lot of people really love those games, and unfortunately, Warner Brothers is shutting them down along with Player First Games and Warner Brothers San Diego. Now, this also includes the cancellation for their AAA Wonder Woman game. A few weeks ago, it was reported that its development wasn't going great, and they were initially going to reboot it, but I guess after further consideration, Warner Brothers decided to cancel it instead and to shut the studio down. And this kind of leans into what we just talked about a moment ago. These AAA games are just not sustainable under these outrageous budgets and long development times that we're currently seeing. Monolith Productions hasn't released a game since 2017, and in a previous report, it was alleged that they had already spent more than $100 million on Wonder Woman and still needed several more years of development time after a reboot. So when you spend that type of money without any kind of return in years and years, then one single flop can completely sink a studio, and that's what we're ultimately seeing here. Warner Brothers' full statement, though, reads, "We have had to make some very difficult decisions to structure our development studios and investments around building the best games possible with our key franchises: Harry Potter, Mortal Kombat, DC, and Game of Thrones. After careful consideration, we are closing 3 of our development studios: Monolith Productions, Player First Games, and Warner Brothers Games San Diego. This is a strategic change in direction and not a reflection of these teams or the talent that consists within them. The development of Monolith's Wonder Woman video game will not move forward." So yeah, this is very PR-like speak. They're trying to lessen the blow, and they confirm their plans for other key franchises. But for anybody who liked previous Monolith games, or for anybody that was just excited for the eventual Wonder Woman game, this is a sad, disappointing announcement. However, I also kind of take this as a lesson that the game industry really needs to look at as we all go forward. Long development times and just these outrageous budgets are high risk, and we are seeing that time and time again. Last time we talked about Wonder Woman's troubled development, I questioned whether or not Wonder Woman had the reach within the game industry to justify that type of budget. I mean, there's really only a few select superheroes that I feel like could justify that type of budget, and ultimately it seems like Warner Brothers couldn't justify the price any longer, and sadly, this is the result of that. These studios just need to better manage their budgets. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode. But until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.